Hello and Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I highly suggest, if you're buying DVDs on Amazon or if you're buying DVDs various places, um, to always incorporate going to big lots. I don't know how much money I saved on this purchase, but I'm pretty excited. I got 5 Universal Studios modern gangster movies for $5. Um, Oddly, the Scarface one doesn't have any special features, which is fine. I'm probably going to get a Scarface special edition at some point. But this movie I saw last night, and I'm not reviewing that one right now, Public Enemies, I'll put a review or some discussion or talk about it in a future video. Public Enemies has a commentary by Michael Mann. So that's $1, and I get a commentary on that by Michael Mann. Public Enemies, I'll get into my thoughts on that at another time. This one right here is Carlito's Way. Now, I priced this DVD around, at least $5 to $15. And now I just got it for $1, and I have a making of documentary attached to it. I don't believe there's a commentary, so I may just try to find the commentary for it online. David Koepp made the screenplay for this book based on the novels Carlito's Way and After Hours by Edwin Torres. Nothing to do with the Martin Scorsese picture. Bill Pankow, really well edited movie. In fact, I would say the editing is a major strength of this film. Obviously, it's directed by Brian De Palma. Reteamed him with Marty Bregman. May he rest in peace. It was an honor to get to know Marty. And Richard Silbert, whose son, I believe, goes on in the film industry in his name. But we got Richard Silbert, probably the greatest production designer of all time, in my opinion. He worked on Rosemary's Baby. He worked on, I believe he worked on, a myriad of films through the years. If you look at the various genres and things that he covered, I think there's definitely an argument to be made he's one of the 5 or 10 best craftspeople ever behind the scenes of a movie. Up there with Walter Murch, up there with Conrad Hall, etc. Modern era, Roger Deakins. So, Carlito's Way, a movie I was proud to see in theaters in 1993. I believe I saw it in December of 1993 at the Upland 8 with my father. Now, this is quite a movie. I remember a lot of sequences in it, quite a lot. The lawyer character in Grand Theft Auto 3 or Vice City or what have you, pretty sure is modeled directly after the Sean Penn character. Now, Sean Penn was not nominated for an Oscar for this film, but I think he either won a Golden Globe or was most certainly nominated for this film. That's notable. Viggo Mortensen has a small role. John Leguizamo and Louis Guzman really shine in this movie. For anyone that ever wants to bash on John Leguizamo when he's brought up at a dinner party, or say Louis Guzman is this or that, they really need to go back and watch this movie and see their performances. I feel they do a really good job. Someone could say this is kind of like a Puerto Rican's Scarface or something, but Carlito is a much different character than Tony Montana. Carlito Brigante, a former drug kingpin, sprung from prison by his high-powered attorney, stuns the New York underworld by vowing to go straight from a history of violence, but his plans are undermined by misguided loyalties and an outmoded code of honor. That's nothing like a Tony Montana character. Tony Montana became so obsessed with the drug as he became a leader of a mafia or an underworld. This guy's on the outside of an underworld, and he thinks he's on the outside for good and for all time's sake. And then every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in. Like 95% sure that's a quote from this movie. Every time I think they've gone out, they pull me back in. And that's Al Pacino saying that there. Look, Brian De Palma made a lot of movies. Um, there's some I identify with him and some I don't as much. This one, it's almost like it's one of his movies, but without all of his usual flourishes. But that's pretty good, though. You know, it's more restrained, more about the character, and I find that to be a really um, positive redirection from Raising Cain, which, you know, weirded people out. Came out in 1992, just the year before. This is a different form of maturation by De Palma, going back to saying, "Hey, I'm going to tell a story," and you know, goddamn all the other flourishes and everything as much, but relies on his craftsmen to add those. I have something in my eye or not? I can't tell. And he just basically, I like the shots filmed in the staircases. I like the scenes involving the dancer. Now, Penelope Ann Miller, she was in every movie in this era. Like, literally every movie from 1990 to 1993 has Penelope Ann Miller in it. Her name is all across the credits for a lot of movies, even up to the late 90s. And she's even in the Oscar-winning movie The Artist of 2012. She's a dancer in this movie, and our lead character is obsessed with her. So we become somewhat infatuated or wanting to see more about her, the way that she's presented and everything. His plans are, when he's in a life and death battle, Carlito takes on the relentless forces that refuse to let him go. Exactly. Action-packed all the way to explosive conclusion. I'd say it's more of a character study with some action thrown in. Strong violence, strong content, sexuality, and language. 2 hours and 24 minutes. So it is a significant piece of work, whereas Scarface is probably 2 hours and 40 minutes or so. So I would say, objectively, they could have trimmed 10 minutes out the movie. I'm pretty sure they made a prequel to this movie, Carlito's Way, Rise to something. I don't know. That was long in development, and by the time it came out, it had gone through a lot of filmmakers and things like that. For sure, De Palma had nothing to do with that. Al Pacino sets the screen on fire, and Sean Penn is terrific. This is Brian De Palma at his best, says Joel Siegel, who probably slammed the hell out of Bonfire of the Vanities and Raising Cain. So what is he? I mean, well, I think a lot of people probably slam those movies, but they're, at least in one case, Bonfire of the Vanities is an absolute classic, a modern day classic. Takes basically some of the things that would be popular in Pulp Fiction and some 90s dramas and action thriller type movies, and refines them into a Capra-esque 80s and 90s set story. So for people that, and even Brian De Palma himself, who want to pile on that movie, they need to get their head right. But for Joel Siegel, I do agree. This is a version of Brian De Palma at his best. It's not the full indulgent Brian De Palma from those movies that I've mentioned. David Koepp, hit and miss with screenplays, but a lot of big hits. Stephen Burham, really good cinematography in this film as well. And the music is very memorable. Suffice it to say, Marty Bregman was a great force in the movie industry, and I hope that his son can carry on the legacy. His son did help produce this movie, and anything else going forward as far as a Scarface reboot or remake, that had been going forward, but you know, we don't hear much about that, which makes me think it's not going to happen. It's a bad idea as well. But so yeah, I mean, I highly recommend Carlito's Way. I really hope if people haven't seen it, they can go ahead and find it somewhere. Once you're in, there's no way out. And what I find to be misleading with that campaign is he is actually out. There's some other circumstances within the movie that I'm not going to spoil that end up, you know, being the main thing that he's got to tangle with. So definitely check the movie out. I mean, you pair Sean Penn and Al Pacino. They never even worked together again. So for all these people saying, Al Pacino and De Niro, great pairing. I mean, clearly, Al Pacino and Sean Penn is a great pairing. You're talking about Al Pacino's won an Oscar. Sean Penn's won 3. Dead Man Walking, Mystic River, and Milk. He and Daniel Day-Lewis are now in that company of having won 3, similar to Jack Nicholson. But Jack Nicholson has a supporting and 2 wins. So Penn and Daniel Day-Lewis are really impressive. In this era, Sean Penn was starring in some movies, but playing a lot of supporting roles too. He really broke out, I guess, as a major star, in my opinion, after Dead Man Walking through the 80s and 90s. In fact, he was in Casualties of War. Again, not the main star, but more of the almost like an antagonist in Casualties of War. And obviously some other movies in the 80s and 90s I'm sure we could all name. But his career really took on another trajectory after Dead Man Walking, of course. So, everybody, I really hope you can check out Carlito's and enjoy the film. I look forward to reviewing it more. It doesn't really have any specific flaws. I could point to say that it's back to familiar ground slightly, but not, some people say it's just doing the same thing again. It's familiar, but it's a character for Al Pacino. And I mean, I'm not going to be disparaging Penelope Ann Miller's work in this film. I'll just say, if a very different casting choice would have been made, this movie could have been elevated more. But she does what she can with the role, and I don't dislike her. I'm just saying she was in a lot of movies in that era. It's kind of hard to see her as a character sometimes, more than, oh, it's that lady that was in every movie in the 90s sometimes. And I thought that at the time when I was a kid too, because I literally used to think that every movie had to have Penelope Ann Miller in it. I mean, think about it. There's a lot of movies with her in it. And you can go ahead and look at her filmography. It's overwhelming how many movies she was in from the 80s to 90s. So anyway, obviously someone differently cast in that film maybe would have helped and elevated it, and maybe that person could have gotten a nomination. Because for a reason, critics never really tuned in with Penelope Ann Miller's work all that much. She had a really, not the most significant role in The Artist. But her work was praised for that, but it was a silent film. So anyway, in terms of Al Pacino's performances, he really dominates this movie, even more than Scarface. Hard to believe, but Scarface, there's other people in the movie featured here or there. He's literally in most of this movie, almost, so it's Carlito's way, and he does something different with the character. He had just won the Oscar, and this movie didn't do all that well financially, but it didn't flop either. So Scent of a Woman was a pretty big hit, and this one was, a good way for him to follow things up. Just didn't pull him a nomination, and neither for De Palma as well. Did kind of a serviceable job of directing on this, similar to his work on Untouchables, and much better than his work on Wise Guys, a really odd comedy movie he made in the 80s that bears almost none of his signature directorial style. Well, anyway, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I hope you can enjoy Carlito's Way. The locations and the way it's shot, and the production design is a major asset to the film, as are the very unique characters and performances. Goodbye for now.